Chapter 1. Before the Gold. In the early 1800s, California was a distant and largely unknown land on the western edge of North America. Long before American settlers arrived, the region was home to hundreds of Native American communities. These tribes had lived on the land for thousands of years, building cultures, traditions, and trade networks that connected mountains, valleys, forests, and rivers. When Spanish explorers arrived in the late 18th century, they began establishing missions along the California coast. Their goal was to expand Spanish influence and spread Christianity. The arrival of the Spanish brought major changes to indigenous life. Diseases spread rapidly, traditional customs were disrupted, and many native people were forced into labor at the missions. In 1821, Mexico gained independence from Spain, and California became part of Mexico. Although California was rich in natural resources, it remained sparsely populated and far from the centers of political power. Ranches stretched across the countryside and small settlements dotted the landscape. Meanwhile, the United States was expanding westward. Many Americans believed that their nation was destined to stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. This belief became known as manifest destiny. Thousands of settlers moved west in search of land, opportunity, and a better future. By the 1840s, tensions between the United States and Mexico had increased. Disputes over territory eventually led to the Mexican-American War. After 2 years of fighting, the war ended in 1848. Mexico ceded a vast amount of land to the United States, including California. At the time, very few people realized how important California would become. It was seen as a remote frontier, far away from the nation's major cities and centers of commerce. But history was about to change forever. In Northern California, a Swiss immigrant named John Sutter was building an agricultural empire. He owned large areas of land and hoped to create a prosperous settlement. To support his growing enterprise, he hired workers to construct a sawmill along the American River. One of those workers was James Wilson Marshall, a carpenter and mill builder. Marshall was a hard-working man with no intention of becoming famous. He spent his days supervising construction and ensuring that the mill was progressing according to plan. On the morning of January 24, 1848, Marshall walked along the river near the construction site. The water had been diverted to help build the mill, exposing parts of the riverbed. As Marshall inspected the area, something unusual caught his eye. A small metallic object glimmered in the sunlight. Curious, he picked it up. The object was bright yellow. Marshall examined it carefully. Could it be gold? The possibility seemed almost unbelievable. He conducted a few simple tests. The metal was soft enough to be shaped, but strong enough not to break. It retained its distinctive yellow color. The more Marshall examined it, the more convinced he became that he had discovered something extraordinary. Excited and nervous, Marshall brought the metal to John Sutter. Together, they tested the material and came to the same conclusion. It was gold, real gold. The discovery had the potential to make them wealthy beyond imagination. Yet instead of celebrating openly, both men became worried. Sutter feared that if news of the discovery spread, workers would abandon their jobs. Farmers would leave their fields. His dream of building a prosperous agricultural settlement could collapse overnight. For that reason, Marshall and Sutter attempted to keep the discovery secret. But gold has a way of attracting attention. Workers whispered among themselves. Rumors spread through nearby settlements. Travelers carried stories from one town to another. Within weeks, people throughout California had begun hearing astonishing reports. Gold had been discovered along the American River. At first, many dismissed the stories as exaggerations. Others believed it was a hoax. But as more people visited the site and returned with actual gold, doubt began to disappear. The rumors were true. California was sitting on one of the greatest treasure discoveries in modern history, and the world was about to find out. At first, the discovery of gold remained a regional rumor. Most Americans living on the East Coast had never seen California and knew very little about it. The territory was thousands of miles away, separated by mountains, deserts, rivers, and vast stretches of wilderness. But rumors have a way of traveling faster than facts. As travelers moved between settlements, stories of gold spread across California. Miners began arriving at the American River. Some found small amounts of gold within hours. Others discovered enough to earn weeks or even months of wages in a single day. Soon, workers throughout California began abandoning their jobs. Farmers left their fields. Sailors deserted their ships. Carpenters dropped their tools. Merchants closed their stores. Everyone wanted to search for gold. John Sutter watched helplessly as workers disappeared from his projects. The very discovery that could have made him rich was destroying the labor force he depended on. By the summer of 1848, news of the discovery reached newspapers beyond California. Reports described rivers filled with gold and ordinary men becoming wealthy overnight. Many readers were skeptical. Stories of hidden treasure often sounded too good to be true. Then came confirmation from the highest levels of government. In December 1848, President James K. Polk addressed the United States Congress. After reviewing official reports, he publicly confirmed that significant quantities of gold had been discovered in California. The effect was immediate. Suddenly, the rumors became reality. People no longer wondered whether gold existed. They wondered how quickly they could reach it. Across America, excitement exploded. Families gathered around newspapers. Neighbors discussed the latest reports. Young men dreamed of fortune. Older men considered one final adventure. The promise of wealth seemed limitless. Thousands made the same decision. They would go west. In 1849, the migration reached extraordinary levels. These fortune seekers became known as the 49ers, named after the year in which most of them arrived. They came from every corner of the United States. Some were farmers, some were merchants, some were laborers, some were educated professionals. Many sold everything they owned to finance the journey. Houses were sold. Businesses were abandoned. Savings were emptied. People risked their futures for a chance at unimaginable wealth. But reaching California would prove far more difficult than anyone expected. There were three main routes. The first was the Overland Trail. Travelers loaded wagons with supplies and crossed thousands of miles of wilderness. The journey often lasted 4 to 6 months. The second route involved sailing around South America. Ships departed from East Coast ports and traveled around Cape Horn, one of the most dangerous maritime routes in the world. The voyage could take 5 to 8 months. The third route crossed Central America. Travelers sailed to Panama, crossed jungles and rivers, then boarded another ship bound for California. Although shorter, this route carried its own dangers. Disease, accidents, and exhaustion claimed countless lives. No matter which path they chose, fortune seekers quickly discovered that reaching California was an adventure in itself. Many never made it. Yet the dream of gold remained stronger than fear. The greatest migration in American history had begun. The journey to California was far more difficult than most people imagined. Thousands of fortune seekers packed their belongings and headed west. They dreamed of rivers filled with gold and fortunes waiting to be collected. But before they could reach the gold fields, they had to survive one of the most challenging journeys of their lives. Those who traveled overland faced endless dangers. Wagon trains stretched across the Great Plains. Travelers endured scorching heat during the day and freezing temperatures at night. Food supplies often ran low. Clean drinking water was not always available. Diseases spread quickly through crowded camps. Cholera became one of the deadliest threats. Entire groups of travelers were devastated by illness. Graves began appearing along the trails leading west. Then came the mountains. The Rocky Mountains presented a massive obstacle. Wagons struggled through steep passes. Animals collapsed from exhaustion. Equipment broke under the strain. Beyond the mountains lay deserts. Some travelers underestimated the distance between water sources. Men, women, and animals died from dehydration. Abandoned wagons littered the landscape as desperate travelers discarded anything that slowed them down. Meanwhile, those who traveled by sea faced different challenges. Ships became overcrowded with passengers. Storms battered vessels for weeks at a time. Food spoiled. Diseases spread below deck. Some voyages lasted longer than expected, leaving passengers hungry and exhausted before they even reached California. Yet despite every hardship, thousands continued forward. The promise of gold was simply too powerful. For many, turning back was not an option. They had invested everything in the dream.
As the gold rush continued, stories of sudden wealth captured the world's imagination. A small number of miners became incredibly rich. Some discovered large deposits of gold and transformed their lives almost overnight. They purchased land, businesses, and luxury goods. Newspapers celebrated their success. Their stories inspired thousands more to travel west. But these success stories represented only a tiny fraction of reality. Most miners never found enough gold to become wealthy. Many barely earned enough money to survive. Some spent months searching without making any significant discoveries. Others lost everything they had invested in the journey. Ironically, many of the people who became truly wealthy during the gold rush were not miners. They were business owners. Merchants sold tools, clothing, food, and equipment. Hotel operators provided lodging. Transportation companies moved people and supplies. One businessman who recognized this opportunity was Levi Strauss. He arrived in California intending to sell durable goods to miners. His sturdy work pants would later become famous around the world as blue jeans. While miners searched rivers for gold, entrepreneurs built businesses that generated consistent profits. Many became wealthier than the miners themselves. The gold rush created winners and losers. It rewarded some, it ruined others. Yet the dream continued to attract people from across the globe. The possibility of discovering a fortune remained irresistible, and California continued to change at an astonishing pace.
Part 6 continue. More and more fortune seekers poured into California. Quiet camps quickly transformed into booming towns. Places that had been nothing more than empty fields only months earlier were suddenly crowded with thousands of people. Wooden buildings appeared almost overnight. General stores opened their doors. Hotels welcomed exhausted travelers. Blacksmith shops worked day and night repairing tools. Saloons filled with miners eager to celebrate after long days of digging. Every week brought new arrivals. Every day brought new opportunities. But rapid growth came with serious problems. There were very few government officials. Police forces barely existed. Courts were overwhelmed. In many mining towns, there was no formal law at all. Arguments over gold claims became common. Miners fought over valuable pieces of land. Sometimes disputes ended with fists. Other times they ended with guns. Bandits soon realized that miners often carried bags filled with gold dust. Travelers became easy targets. Robberies increased across California. Some criminals attacked isolated mining camps during the night. Others waited along roads connecting towns. Fear became part of everyday life. Because official law enforcement was weak, many communities created vigilance committees. These groups of ordinary citizens attempted to punish criminals themselves. Although some believed they were protecting their towns, others abused their power. Justice was often swift, but it was not always fair. California's gold rush had created incredible wealth. It had also created violence unlike anything the region had seen before. CHAPTE7 THEPEOPLEWHOEALLYBECAME Richmust miners dreamed of discovering enormous amounts of gold. Only a small number actually succeeded. For the majority, life was far more difficult than the stories suggested. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. Many miners found only tiny amounts of gold. Some barely earned enough money to buy food. Others lost every dollar they had invested in the journey west. Ironically, the greatest fortunes of the gold rush were often made by people who never searched for gold at all. Business owners recognized a different opportunity. Instead of digging for gold, they sold supplies to miners. Every miner needed food. Every miner needed tools. Every miner needed clothing. As demand increased, prices rose dramatically. A shovel that cost $1 in the East might sell for $10 in California. Boots, blankets, cooking pots, and tents became extremely valuable. One young businessman named Levi Strauss arrived in California hoping to build a business. Instead of mining, he sold durable clothing to hardworking laborers. His strong work pants eventually evolved into the famous blue jeans known around the world today. Hotels, restaurants, shipping companies, banks, and transportation businesses also earned enormous profits. The lesson became clear. During the gold rush, selling supplies was often more profitable than searching for gold. Thousands chased treasure. A smaller number quietly built lasting businesses that would survive long after the gold itself became harder to find. CHAPTE8IMMIGANTSFOMAOUNDTHE World news of California's gold did not remain inside the United States. It spread across oceans. Within months, people from every continent began making plans to travel to California. Ships arrived carrying passengers from Europe, Latin America, Australia, China, and many other parts of the world. Each group brought its own language, traditions, and culture. California rapidly became one of the most diverse places on Earth. Among the largest immigrant groups were Chinese workers. Many left southern China hoping to escape poverty and political instability. The journey across the Pacific Ocean was long and dangerous. Yet thousands believed the risk was worth taking. When they arrived, they worked tirelessly in the mining camps. Many organized themselves into cooperative groups, sharing food, tools, and responsibilities. Despite their hard work, Chinese miners often faced discrimination. Some local miners believed foreigners should not have access to gold claims. Special taxes were imposed on foreign miners. Violence and intimidation became increasingly common. Even so, Chinese communities continued to grow. They established businesses, temples, schools, and neighborhoods that became permanent parts of California. Immigrants from many nations helped build roads, businesses, farms, and cities. Their contributions extended far beyond the gold fields. The California Gold Rush was no longer simply an American story. It had become a global event that connected people from every corner of the world. Thousands of years, Native American tribes had lived peacefully across California. They depended on the rivers, forests, mountains, and valleys for food, shelter, and spiritual traditions. Their connection to the land had been built over countless generations. The gold rush changed everything. As hundreds of thousands of miners poured into California, they occupied lands that had belonged to native communities for centuries. Forests were cut down. Rivers were diverted for mining. Wildlife disappeared, and traditional hunting grounds were destroyed. Competition for land and resources quickly led to conflict. Many native villages were forced to relocate. Some communities lost access to clean water and food. Diseases brought by newcomers spread rapidly among indigenous populations, causing devastating losses. Violence became increasingly common. Some settlers attacked native villages, while others forced indigenous people from their ancestral lands. Entire communities were displaced, and many cultural traditions were disrupted. For native Californians, the gold rush was not a story of wealth and opportunity. It was a time of enormous suffering. Today, historians recognize that the gold rush transformed California's economy, but it also brought lasting consequences for the people who had lived there long before gold was discovered. CHAPTE10 THEWOMENOFTHEGOLD rush. When people imagine the California gold rush, they often picture men digging for gold beside rivers. But women also played an important role in shaping this remarkable period of history. Some women traveled west with their husbands and families, hoping to build new lives in California. Others arrived on their own, determined to create opportunities for themselves. Instead of searching for gold, many women opened boarding houses, restaurants, laundries, bakeries, and small businesses. Miners were willing to pay high prices for home-cooked meals, clean clothes, and comfortable places to sleep. As a result, many women earned steady incomes while miners struggled to find gold. Teachers, nurses, and shopkeepers also became important members of growing communities. Women helped transform rough mining camps into permanent towns. Schools were built. Churches were established. Families began settling in California instead of simply passing through. Their contributions extended far beyond business. They helped create stable communities where future generations could live and prosper. CHAPTE11 SANFANCISCOTHECITYTHAT Bilterpass. No city changed more dramatically during the gold rush than San Francisco. Before gold was discovered, it was a small settlement with only a few hundred residents. Within just a few years, everything changed. Ships from around the world crowded the harbor. Merchants established stores. Banks opened their doors. Hotels filled with travelers. Construction crews worked day and night to build new streets and buildings. The population exploded. Many sailors abandoned their ships to search for gold, leaving dozens of vessels anchored in the harbor. Some abandoned ships were eventually converted into warehouses, hotels, restaurants, and businesses. San Francisco became the financial center of the gold rush. Gold dust flowed through its banks. Goods arrived from every continent. Newspapers reported discoveries from the mining camps almost every day. The city's rapid growth attracted entrepreneurs, investors, engineers, and skilled workers. While many miners searched rivers for gold, others built companies that would shape California's future. By the mid-1850s, San Francisco had become one of the fastest-growing cities in the world. Its transformation demonstrated that the greatest legacy of the gold rush was not only the gold itself but the cities, industries, and opportunities that emerged because of it.
The years passed, and the easy gold that had once been found in rivers and streams slowly began to disappear. The first miners had collected the richest deposits using simple pans and shovels, but now finding gold required much more effort. Men dug deeper into the earth, built large mining operations, and invested in expensive equipment. Individual prospectors found it increasingly difficult to compete with wealthy companies that had the money to purchase powerful machinery and hire large crews of workers. Mining was no longer just an adventure. It had become an industry. Massive hydraulic mining systems blasted entire hillsides with high-pressure streams of water. Tons of soil were washed into rivers in search of tiny pieces of gold. Although this method increased production, it also caused enormous damage to the environment. Rivers became clogged with mud and debris. Forests disappeared. Fish populations declined, and fertile farmland downstream was buried beneath layers of sediment. The search for wealth was transforming California's landscape forever. As mining became more difficult, many fortune seekers accepted an uncomfortable truth. The dream that had brought them across mountains and oceans would never come true. Some packed their belongings and returned home with little more than memories. Others remained in California, choosing to build new lives instead of continuing the endless search for gold. Many former miners became farmers, merchants, blacksmiths, teachers, builders, and business owners. They established permanent communities where rough mining camps had once stood. Roads connected isolated settlements. Schools educated children. Churches became gathering places for growing families. What had begun as temporary camps slowly developed into thriving towns and cities. California's population continued to grow at an extraordinary pace. Businesses expanded rapidly as new banks, shipping companies, factories, and railroads supported the growing economy. Investors recognized that California's future extended far beyond gold alone. Agriculture flourished in the fertile valleys. Trade connected the Pacific coast with the rest of the United States and the world. In 1850, only 2 years after gold had been discovered, California officially became the 31st state of the United States. The speed of its transformation amazed people across the country. Few places in history had changed so dramatically in such a short period of time. The gold rush also changed the nation's economy. Millions of dollars in gold entered banks and businesses, helping finance new industries, transportation networks, and infrastructure. Railroads expanded westward. New technologies emerged. Cities grew larger than ever before. California became a gateway connecting America with the Pacific Ocean and international markets. Yet the gold rush left behind more than prosperity. It left stories of extraordinary courage. Stories of impossible journeys across deserts and mountains. Stories of families who sacrificed everything for hope. Stories of immigrants who crossed oceans in search of opportunity. Stories of Native American communities whose lives were forever changed. Stories of people who became incredibly wealthy. And stories of thousands who never found the fortune they had dreamed of. Even today, visitors can still walk through the historic towns where miners once searched rivers from sunrise until sunset. Old wooden buildings remain standing as reminders of an era when a single discovery transformed an entire nation. The California Gold Rush proved that one unexpected moment could reshape history. When James Marshall noticed a small piece of shining metal beneath the water on that quiet January morning in 1848, he could never have imagined what would follow. His discovery triggered one of the largest human migrations in history. It built cities, created fortunes, destroyed dreams, changed landscapes, and transformed California from a remote frontier into one of the most influential places in the world. More than a century and a half later, the story continues to inspire historians, filmmakers, and millions of people who wonder what they would have done if they had heard the same incredible words that echoed across America in 1848. Gold has been found in California. Those simple words changed countless lives forever. And they changed the history of the United States forever.